I caught my wife cheating with another man. She lost her family, her home, and everything she thought was secure. I still remember the exact clatter of keys on the hallway table the night it happened. A metallic punctuation to a sentence I didn't know I was reading. I came home early from an out-of-town job because the kids' school had called about a broken tooth and I wanted to be there. Our front door was unlocked. That should have been my first clue. The living room lights were down low and there was music. Not our music, something slick and unfamiliar. I froze in the doorway for a second, the kind of stupid hesitation that looks cinematic in movies but feels like slow molasses in real life. Then I saw them. Not a scene, not even the dramatic clinch I'd imagined in some worst-case daydream, but a tangled human mess. My wife sitting close to another man on the couch, her hand on his knee, laughing at something I couldn't hear. For a second I thought maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe they were just friends, an old colleague. But then the way she looked at him when he touched her face made a slow, corrosive sense in my chest. This was not friendship. I left the door open and went to the kitchen like a ghost. I wanted to march in and make a scene. Instead I stood at the sink and watched the water gather in the basin as if doing dishes could steady me. My brain split into tiny compartments: anger, disbelief, shame, a pragmatic part cataloging what this would mean. I texted no one. I slammed no doors. I sat in the car in the driveway for 20 minutes and tried to breathe. When I finally went in, I did something I didn't expect. I recorded. Not to humiliate, at least not at first. I downloaded the timestamp, took a few photos from the doorway, and left the phone on the table where they'd see it. I told myself I wanted proof in case my memory started lying. She saw the phone, and her face shifted, not guilt exactly, but a rapid calculation. He bolted for the back hallway and left through the side door. She tried to explain right there. It was a mistake, it meant nothing, they'd been reconnecting after a bereavement, yada yada. The words sounded thin. That night I didn't yell. I didn't immediately call her parents or mine. I slept on the couch downstairs and pretended my phone wasn't vibrating. The next morning, I felt like a man trying to put an animal back into a cage after it had already chewed it open. I knew things would change, but I didn't yet know how wide the change would be. How the sound of the front door would never sound the same. How family and money and reputation would start to reconfigure in ways I couldn't have predicted. The first people I told were my parents. My dad is the kind of man who organizes storms into checklists. He asked for facts before emotion. I told him what I'd seen and showed him the photos. He didn't shout or cry. He read the timestamps and said, "You need to think about the kids first." That was the phrase that shifted my thinking from furious spontaneity to cold calculation. Kids first. I called my best friend next, then my sister. They offered the usual mixture of rage and advice. Confront, expose, make her pay. But the more I talked, the more I realized I didn't want a viral spectacle. I wanted a path that preserved the children and resolved the financial mess without turning our home into a courtroom. The thing that surprised me was how quickly word traveled without me wanting it to. In a small suburban circle, news is a dull blade. It cuts, then it dulls, but it finds the soft spots. Someone at the hardware store noticed I wasn't in on Tuesday. Someone else mentioned a quiet conversation I'd had on the phone. By the time I called my wife's sister to ask if she'd noticed anything, the sister already knew more than I had planned to say. She cried on the phone, angry and protective. That call ended with her saying, "Our parents need to know." And then I found myself being the one calling my in-laws. Their reaction was immediate and cold. I had expected shock, perhaps pleading. Instead there was a measured disappointment, a careful withdrawal. Invitations stopped. My wife's mother stopped picking up my texts. The family WhatsApp that had been filled with birthday gifts and meme links suddenly turned quiet. I could feel the social fabric around her beginning to fray. I did not celebrate that rupture. I watched it with an odd guilt. But withdrawal is a powerful tool, and it started to work before any lawyers were involved. Meanwhile, at home, we started keeping distance. She insisted she wanted to talk, to explain, to go to couples therapy. I wanted to protect the children and, privately, to make sure our finances wouldn't get siphoned off in a noisy fight. I called a family law attorney for a consultation, not to get even, but to understand emergency measures. Temporary custody, exclusive use of the family home, freezing joint accounts if necessary. The lawyer's practical checklist felt like armor. In the weeks that followed, the armor would be tested in ways neither of us expected. Once legal practicality enters a home, intimacy dies in the quiet way of paperwork. I learned quickly that you don't have to be vindictive to lose things. You just need to take steps to protect what's left. I filed for temporary orders, custody to keep the kids in their routines, and a request for exclusive occupation of the house while things were sorted. The court doesn't like appending children's lives, and the judge signed an interim order that kept the kids with me during the school week, citing stability. That small legal document felt like a bazooka in a box of kitchen knives. Powerful and scary. At the same time, I called the bank. We had joint accounts and a couple of credit lines in both our names for renovations and the like. I asked for them to place a temporary hold on new transfers until we could get a court-mediated agreement. Banks do not enjoy freezing accounts, but they comply when presented with court paperwork. That day, I learned how fragile household liquidity is, and how easily access can be revoked. My wife called furious, accusing me of trying to control her. I didn't answer. Her absence from the bills she used to manage soon produced a cascade: unpaid subscriptions, them pinging our phone, a missed automatic payment that triggered a late fee. Word spread further. Her sister, who had been wavering, announced to the extended family that she couldn't be seen as supportive of her sister's choices and distanced herself. Her own mother posted vaguely on social media about family values. Nothing explicit, but the tone was clear. Colleagues at my wife's office started whispering. In our small town, reputation is currency. Hers began to devalue in the way everyone could see but no one spoke aloud. I never wanted to deprive our kids of their mother. I wanted accountability and honesty. But there was also a bureaucratic logic to what followed. When one spouse is perceived as unstable or untrustworthy, the social systems we live in retreat. Friends stopped making dinner plans. The mortgage broker we'd used to refinance looked at our files differently. People take sides sometimes not because of demonstrable evidence, but because aligning with a perceived, wronged party minimizes their own risk. It's ugly and practical and true. The most painful part wasn't the legal paperwork or the practical inconveniences. It was watching her social world collapse like a house of cards. Invitations stopped. Mutual friends avoided our block. The PDA liaison called me to ask if the kids were okay and whether we needed anything. She didn't ask for details, just for assurances. I gave them. I wanted to be the shield. Meanwhile, my wife's photos on social media, once curated and bright, became still. She would post a quote about finding oneself, and the comments would be thin, polite, or not there at all. I don't think people realized how brutal silence can be. She tried to fight back. She started sending messages to family members, offering explanations, apologies, versions of events that sometimes shifted when challenged. But in the social ledger, there are entries you can't easily erase. Old friends asked her to meet up and then canceled. Her parents' friends, the ones who'd recommended her for volunteer committees and small speaking engagements, started declining calls. Word reached her workplace. She worked in a local firm where long-standing personal ties mattered. Rumors, as they do, crept in. A project she'd been leading quietly stalled. A client who didn't want complications backed away. Here's a truth nobody tells you about moral judgment in tight communities. It is slow, accumulative, and often bureaucratic. People don't always shout. Sometimes they simply stop entrusting you with things. Tasks, leadership, letters of recommendation. If you lose the trust of your referees, you lose the kind of social access that turns into jobs, opportunities, and eventually, money. My wife's income didn't vanish overnight. But when projects were reassigned and clients requested other contacts, the cracks widened into real damage. By the time we reached mediation, the emotional wound had been accompanied by practical erosion. She had fewer people willing to vouch for her, fewer friendly references, and less buffer against financial decisions we were forced to make. That made the legal negotiations colder. It's hard to negotiate for mercy when no one is standing in the back of the room whispering, "Give her a chance." Mediation is a strange theater, a flat room with a round table where people who once shared toothpaste now split bank accounts. We had no prenup. That fact felt like a cliff edge I hadn't considered when we were younger and reckless. In our state, the law presumes equitable distribution. Not necessarily 50-50, but fair given contributions, custody arrangements, and other factors. I wanted to be fair. I also wanted to ensure the kids had a home, that their school routine and neighborhood didn't fracture. Our mediator asked for full disclosure of assets. That's when the math became clinical and cold. There were the obvious items. House equity, the 2 cars, one primarily my work truck, one her commuter sedan, savings, retirement contributions. There were also smaller but meaningful things. Her jewelry gifted by family, a portion of the contractor payments for a passive rental property she'd been nominally on the deed for, and a small art collection she treasured. Because of the interim court order granting me temporary exclusive use of the house and the custody arrangement, the mediator leaned toward an arrangement that minimized upheaval for the children. I would keep the house for now. The kids would stay in the primary school district with me, and she would receive a scheduling of assets meant to give her immediate cash for living expenses. But here's where things tilted. Her social isolation meant she had fewer people willing to co-sign loans, fewer clients who'd pay upfront, and less credit leverage for bridging funds. The mediator tried to be practical and offered a lump sum settlement for some items in exchange for a quicker split. Money she could withdraw to get a place and start over. She accepted. I didn't want her to be homeless. I wanted a clean split with dignity. But because she had fewer options and the community had quietly taken sides, the settlement left her with less than she might otherwise have had. It was legal, yes, and arguably fair under the circumstances, but it felt like a social arithmetic as much as a legal one. Trust equals leverage. After the settlement, the immediate scramble began. She found a small apartment across town with rent I guaranteed for 3 months because I couldn't stomach the idea of our kids seeing their mother without a roof over her head. She took what she could: clothes, a couple of picture frames, a toaster. The house felt huge and hollow when she left, like someone had cut a seam and removed the color. In the neighborhood, people kept their distance. My in-laws, who had been pillars of support for both of us, sent a neutral note about privacy and wished the kids well. That was all. It wasn't cruel in intent. It was cold, practical. Social ties had been retracted like a latticework. She tried to keep working. For a while, freelance clients rebooked, then trickled out. She posted a heartfelt note about personal mistakes on social media and deleted it the next morning. The comments were a mixture of sympathy and thinly veiled judgment. A local friend attempted to organize a fundraiser to help cover moving costs. The friend later told me people were hesitant to donate for fear of being associated with controversy. That small sting, the refusal to help out of reputational risk, was something I hadn't anticipated when my anger was fresh. The financial reality set in. Without a steady client pipeline and with less familial support, her savings dwindled. She sold some personal items to cover rent and basic expenses. The rental property she'd been associated with was bought out of our shared accounts as part of the agreement, and her name removed from the deed in exchange for a smaller cash settlement. Little by little, assets that had once been part of her daily life, the car she preferred, the sentimental jewelry, left her hands. It felt like watching a slow, legal exsanguination. Not violent, but unmistakable. We both carried scars. She carried humiliation and practical loss. I carried a hollow victory and nights where I questioned whether any of it had been worth the collateral damage. The kids, bless them, adjusted better than I feared. They became experts at compartmentalizing joy. Soccer practice with dad, weekend visits with mom. They asked few questions beyond the practical: when is mom coming over? And can she come for lunch? Which was both a mercy and a heartbreak. The real complexity came when they mirrored community attitudes. One of their classmates' parents asked pointed questions about what happened, and my child came home repeating a line they'd heard on the playground. That was a jab I hadn't expected. My wife, in private, would call sometimes late at night. We had conversations that were quiet, not the heated confrontations of the early days. Sometimes she apologized. Sometimes she explained. Once she said, tearfully, that she hadn't chosen to hurt our family but had chosen a moment of feeling alive, and that had become the most damning truth to the community. It wasn't about him, she said. It was about the space I felt I'd lost. I listened. I didn't know if I believed her entirely, nor did I want to be naive. But listening became a tiny human task amidst the paperwork and the social fallout. Months passed. The financial arrangements settled into a rhythm. She found odd jobs, tutoring, design work for a couple of small clients who didn't care about local gossip. She moved 3 times in 18 months, each move cheaper than the last. The community's coldness softened in some corners and hardened in others. People who had been friends with both of us chose sides in private. Some wrote notes of support to the kids, others simply stopped answering texts. I could see the cost of the social sanction reflected in the small things: unanswered calls, fewer invites, and absence at birthdays. The moral victory, if that's what I had, felt like a dull coin. Update. A year and a half after the initial discovery, things looked different in ways I didn't expect. The cafe that had once canceled a collaboration with my wife's small design business reached back out because they needed branding work for a second location. My wife took it. The clients were not local stalwarts but a chain with no interest in neighborhood drama. Slowly, she rebuilt a modest professional life. She rented a studio in a different part of town, started a small online shop, and took a night class. It was humbling work and honest. Family ties remained frayed but not permanently severed. Her mother visited once, awkward and tearful. They spoke for hours and didn't solve everything, but they spoke. My in-laws softened at the edges. Not full rapprochement, but less ice. There was a small settlement with a subcontractor who'd lost money in our building project. We agreed to a partial payment plan that covered some of the cafe's lost weekend revenue. I never wanted to be punitive beyond protection, and making that partial restitution felt like a small moral correction. Most importantly, my wife began to rebuild a sense of self that didn't rely on other people's validation. She started volunteering at a community arts program and found it grounding. It didn't erase the months of loss, the small humiliations, or the property she no longer owned. Those were gone. But she found new rhythms, a steady client, a few loyal customers, and, slowly, some reclaimed dignity. I still think about the calculus we all did that year. Who to believe, how to protect children, how to negotiate fairness when social capital is unequal. I don't have tidy lessons. I have reminders that human error can cascade into institutional consequences, that social ostracism wounds in practical ways, and that rebuilding is possible but costly. I also learned that being right doesn't feel triumphant for long. It's quieter than that, more like a low, steady hum in the background of daily life. If there's one thing I would tell anyone reading this, it's this: shame works like acid. It eats at the infrastructure of lives, jobs, friendships, housing, and its damage is rarely limited to the person who made the mistake. If you're hurt, protect yourself and your kids first. But try, if you can, to measure the fallout before you let a whole world withdraw. Sometimes compassion is the only thing that prevents a small failure from becoming a total collapse.